My husband didn't say a word when he placed the tablet on the kitchen table. He just turned the screen toward me and pressed play. For a moment I didn't understand what I was looking at. The image was grainy, gray with night vision shadows. The timestamp blinked in the corner. The hallway of our house looked unfamiliar through the security camera lens, colder, almost clinical. Then I saw myself walking through the front door. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. It was late. I remembered that night instantly, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floor under my heels, the way I had paused to smooth my hair before stepping fully inside. In the video I looked nervous, guilty. I could feel my husband watching me across the table now. Not blinking. Not moving. I didn't dare look at him. On the screen I stood in the entryway for a second too long, my hand still resting on the door. My chest rose and felt like I had just run a mile. Then I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. I remembered exactly why. Because 5 minutes earlier I had been outside in the dark, pressed against someone who wasn't my husband. The memory hit me like heat rushing through my veins. The cold night air, the quiet street, the way his hands had found my waist as if they already knew the shape of me. I swallowed hard. The video kept playing. There I was again, opening my eyes slowly, touching my lips with the tips of my fingers like I was checking if something had changed. And maybe it had. Across the table my husband finally spoke. His voice was calm. Too calm. "You came home late that night." The room suddenly felt smaller. The soft yellow light over the kitchen island seemed brighter than usual. I noticed ridiculous details. A glass with a water ring under it, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the way his fingers rested loosely on the tablet. Like this was nothing. Like he did this every night. "I had drinks with Claire," I said, my voice already thinner than I wanted. The lie slid out automatically. He nodded once. Then he reached forward and dragged the progress bar back on the video. My stomach twisted. The footage rewound a few seconds. The moment where I leaned against the wall. Where my hand drifted slowly down my throat. To my chest. Like I was trying to steady the storm inside my body. I remembered exactly what I had been feeling then. His mouth still on mine. His warmth still lingering on my skin. My husband tapped the screen lightly. "Look at your face," he said quietly. I forced myself to glance up. On the screen, the woman in the hallway looked flushed. Breathless. Almost glowing. Not like someone who had just come home from drinks with a friend. Like someone who had just stepped away from something dangerous. Something intoxicating. Something she didn't want to stop. My throat went dry. The video continued for a few more seconds before my husband paused it again. Silence settled over the kitchen. Thick. Heavy. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair. And for the first time since the video started, he smiled. Not angry. Not hurt. Just curious. "There's something interesting about security cameras," he said. My pulse began pounding in my ears. Because suddenly I had the terrifying feeling that the clip he showed me wasn't the part one should be afraid of. The way he smiled unsettled me more than anger ever could have. If he had shouted, if he had slammed the tablet shut, I might have defended myself. I might have lied better. Panic would have had somewhere to go. But this quiet curiosity, it felt like standing on ice that hadn't cracked yet. My husband leaned forward again and tapped the screen. The paused image of me in the hallway flickered slightly, my body against the wall, my eyes half closed like I was still somewhere else. "Watch closely," he said. His voice stayed calm, patient. The video started again. I forced myself to breathe slowly, even though my fingers were gripping the edge of the table now. On the screen I pushed myself off the wall. My heels clicked softly against the floor as I walked toward the living room. The security camera caught every small detail. The way I paused to kick my shoes off. The way my shoulders rolled back like I was trying to collect myself. I remembered that moment painfully well. I had been trying to erase the feeling of his hand still resting on my waist. Trying to slow my heart before my husband saw me. But the camera saw everything. In the footage I stopped halfway down the hallway and looked toward the bedroom door. Waiting. Listening. Making sure my husband was asleep. Across the table he paused the video again. My stomach dropped. "That's an interesting moment," he murmured. I could feel heat climbing slowly up my neck. "It was late," I said quietly. I didn't want to wake you. Another lie. He studied my face carefully now, like he was comparing it to the woman frozen on the screen. Then he tilted the tablet slightly toward himself and dragged the timeline forward. Let me show you something else. My chest tightened instantly. The footage jumped ahead. The timestamp now read 11:58 p.m. My pulse stumbled. That wasn't when I came home. The camera showed the empty hallway. The house was quiet, dim. A faint rectangle of light spilled from the kitchen. Then the front door opened again. But this time, it wasn't me. A man stepped inside. For a second I forgot how to breathe. He moved carefully like he didn't want to make noise. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark jacket. I knew that shape instantly. Even in black and white. Even through the distorted lens. The tablet suddenly felt too bright to look at. My husband didn't pause the video this time. The man stood in the entryway for a moment, glancing around the house slowly. Then he stepped farther inside. And my husband finally looked up at me. His eyes were calm, but something inside them had changed. You see, he said softly, almost thoughtfully, when we installed the security cameras, I assumed they'd protect the house from strangers. The man on the screen moved closer down the hallway, closer to the bedroom, closer to where my husband should have been sleeping. My heart started pounding so hard it made my vision blur. But sometimes, my husband continued, his voice quiet and steady, they show you something much more interesting. He paused the video right as the man's hand reached for the hallway wall. Then he turned the tablet slowly back toward me, and finally asked the question I had been dreading since the moment he pressed play. Do you want to explain why he came inside our house after you? The question hung between us like something fragile. Do you want to explain why he came inside our house after you? My mouth opened but nothing came out. The kitchen suddenly felt too quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming behind me, the faint ticking of the wall clock above the doorway. Every tiny sound seemed louder than it should be. On the tablet, the paused image of him stood frozen in the hallway. One step inside our home. One step past a line that should have never been crossed. My voice cracked and I cleared my throat quickly. I didn't know he came in. Even as the words left my mouth, I knew how weak they sounded. My husband didn't react right away. He just watched me the way someone studies a puzzle they're already close to solving. Then he pressed play again. The footage moved forward. The man in the video, Evan, walked farther down the hallway. Slowly. Carefully. His hand brushed the wall like he was feeling his way through unfamiliar territory. Except it wasn't unfamiliar. He had been here once before. Just once. But that had been enough. My fingers tightened together under the table. The camera angle showed him reaching the corner where the hallway split. One direction toward the guest room, the other toward the master bedroom. Toward us. My husband paused the video again. Strange, he murmured. His finger tapped lightly on the screen near Evan's shoulder. He walks like someone who knows the layout. My stomach twisted painfully. Because he was right. Evan had stood in that hallway before, months earlier during a dinner party. Just a quick visit, a polite tour of the house, glasses of wine and harmless conversation. Nothing suspicious. Nothing anyone would remember. Except now the memory felt dangerous. My husband leaned back in his chair again, studying me. You said you didn't know he came inside. I nodded quickly. Too quickly. Yes. The lie tasted dry in my mouth. His eyes stayed on mine for a long moment. Then he tilted his head slightly. Maybe. He picked up the tablet and slid it across the table toward me. Watch the next part. My pulse started racing again. I looked down at the screen as he pressed play. Evan stood in the hallway for a moment, glancing toward the bedroom door. Then something happened that made my chest tighten. He pulled out his phone. The screen glowed faintly in his hand. A second later, my phone vibrated on the kitchen table beside me in the video. Even before the footage showed it clearly, I remembered that exact moment. The buzz against the wooden table. The message lighting up the screen. My breath grew shallow. Across from me, my husband spoke softly. Look at the timestamp. I glanced at the corner of the video. 11:59 p.m. 1 minute after I had walked inside. On the screen I stepped back into the hallway, my phone in my hand. My hair was still messy from the night air. my lips still slightly swollen from a kiss I should have never allowed. And when I saw him standing there, the version of me on camera didn't look surprised. She smiled. Slowly, like she had been expecting him. I felt the blood drain from my face. The video froze again. My husband didn't look at the tablet this time. He looked straight at me. "That's the part," he said quietly, "where your story starts to fall apart." The frozen image on the screen felt unbearable to look at. There I was, standing in the hallway, phone still in my hand, smiling at a man who absolutely should not have been inside my house. And the worst part? It wasn't an awkward smile. It wasn't confusion. It was the kind of smile that comes from recognition, from anticipation, from a moment that had already begun long before the door opened. My husband let the silence stretch. I could feel it pressing against my ribs. Finally, I forced myself to speak. "He wasn't supposed to come inside." The words came out barely louder than a whisper. My husband didn't react immediately. His fingers traced the edge of the tablet slowly, thoughtfully, like he was deciding which piece of evidence to show next. "But you were expecting him," he said. Not a question. Fact. I stared down at the paused footage again. My shoulders looked relaxed in the video, my body leaning slightly toward Evan like gravity had shifted in his direction. That detail alone made my stomach twist. "He just followed me," I said weakly. Even I didn't believe it. My husband exhaled quietly through his nose. Then he pressed play. The moment continued. On the screen, Evan stepped closer to me in the hallway. Not quickly. Not aggressively. Just confidently. Like he already knew I wouldn't stop him. The overhead light caught the side of his face. His expression was calm, but there was something unmistakable in his posture. The way his shoulders lowered, the way his gaze stayed locked on mine. The kind of attention that warms your skin even before someone touches you. In the footage, I glanced toward the bedroom door. Checking. Listening. My husband noticed that too. He paused the video again right as my eyes moved down the hallway. "You looked toward our room," he said quietly. My chest tightened. "I didn't want to wake you." He tilted his head slightly. "But you still let him come closer." I didn't answer. Because the video already had. On the screen, Evan stepped into my space until barely a breath separated us. My back brushed the wall behind me, and for a second neither of us moved. Just looking at each other. The kind of moment where the air feels heavier. Charged. Even through the grainy black and white footage, you could see the tension. Then Evan lifted his hand. Slowly. Carefully. His fingers brushed a loose strand of hair away from my face. The movement was small, but the reaction it caused in me was impossible to miss. My eyes closed for half a second. My head tilted just slightly into his touch. Across the table, I heard my husband shift in his chair. The video stopped again. I couldn't bring myself to look up. Because the room suddenly felt warmer than before. Like every hidden thought I'd buried that night had now been dragged into the light. My husband spoke after a moment. Still calm. Still controlled. "You didn't push him away." My throat tightened. "No," I admitted. It was the first honest word I had said all night. Another long pause settled over the kitchen. Then my husband leaned forward again. His voice dropped just slightly. "But that's not the part that interested me most." My heart skipped, because he reached for the timeline again, and dragged it forward, past the moment in the hallway, past the place where Evan's hand had been resting against my cheek, past the point where things had almost crossed a line. The new timestamp appeared on the screen. 12:07 a.m. My pulse started racing again. The video resumed, and suddenly the camera angle had changed. This one was from the living room. The couch, the dim lamp, the soft shadows across the walls. And there we were. Me. And Evan. Much closer now. Much too close. My husband watched my face carefully as the footage played. Then he said something that made a chill crawl slowly down my spine. "You see, the hallway camera only shows part of the story." His finger tapped lightly against the tablet. "But the living room camera." He leaned back again, eyes never leaving mine. "Has a much better view." I didn't want to look at the screen anymore. But I couldn't look away either. The living room camera showed everything from a wide angle. The couch, the coffee table, the lamp in the corner casting a soft pool of light across the carpet. And us, standing in the middle of it. Too close. The footage played silently, but I could still hear that moment in my memory. The quiet rustle of Evan's jacket as he took it off, the faint creak of the floor under his steps. On the screen I watched myself pacing once across the room, my arms folded tightly across my chest like I was trying to hold something inside. Evan said something then. The camera couldn't capture the words, but I remembered them. "You looked at me all night." I had shaken my head when he said it, but the denial hadn't been very convincing. Even now I could see it in my body language, the way I avoided his eyes, the way my shoulders tensed when he stepped closer. Across the table, my husband rested his chin lightly against his hand, watching, studying. The video continued. Evan moved toward the couch but didn't sit. Instead he leaned one hand against the backrest, his body angled toward me, waiting. And eventually I stopped pacing. Right in front of him. For a moment on the screen neither of us moved. The kind of stillness that only happens when something dangerous is hanging in the air between two people. My husband paused the video again. "You hesitated," he said softly. I swallowed. Yes. The word came out automatically, because that part was true. I had hesitated. For a few seconds. Maybe 10. On the screen the paused image showed Evan looking down at me. My hands were still folded against my chest, but my body had leaned just slightly closer. Like gravity had changed again. My husband tapped the tablet once. "Watch your hands." He pressed play. In the footage my arms slowly unfolded. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just a slow release of tension. And then my fingers reached out. Lightly. Touching the front of Evan's shirt. Even seeing it now made a shiver run through me. Because I remembered the exact moment that touch happened. The warmth of his chest under the thin fabric. The sudden awareness of how close we were standing. On the video Evan exhaled. His hand lifted. For a second it hovered near my waist. Like he was asking a silent question. And I answered it without saying a word. I didn't step back. His hand settled against my side. Across the kitchen table, my husband's eyes flicked up from the screen to my face. "You leaned into him." I closed my eyes briefly. "I know." The admission sat heavily in the air. He nodded slowly. Then he scrubbed a hand across his jaw and glanced back down at the tablet. "Here's the thing," he said after a moment. Something about his tone had changed slightly. Still calm, but sharper. More focused. "You keep acting like that's the moment everything crossed the line." My stomach twisted again. Because his finger was already dragging the timeline forward. Past the moment where Evan's hand rested on my waist. Past the moment where our foreheads almost touched. The new timestamp appeared. 12:14 a.m. My pulse started racing all over again. The camera still showed the living room. But now the couch cushions were slightly shifted. The lamplight was dimmer. And Evan and I were no longer standing. We were sitting. Close. Too close. His arm resting along the back of the couch behind me. My knees turned slightly toward him. My husband let the video play for 3 quiet seconds. Then he looked at me again. And asked something that made my breath catch. "You told me nothing happened that night." My chest tightened. "Yes." The word barely left my lips. He nodded slowly. Then he tapped the screen once more. Freezing the frame right as Evan leaned toward me. My hand resting against his chest. My face only inches from his. My husband's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Then explain to me." His eyes held mine. "Why you look like you're about to kiss him." The paused frame felt like it was staring back at me. My hand against Evan's chest. His face leaning closer. The space between our mouths so small it almost didn't exist anymore. I remembered the exact warmth of that moment. The faint scent of his cologne. The quiet rhythm of his breathing. The way the room had seemed to shrink until nothing existed except the two of us on that couch. But remembering it now with my husband sitting across the table, made my skin feel too tight. "I don't know," I said softly. It wasn't a convincing answer. And we both knew it. My husband studied my face for a moment longer before he looked back at the screen. Then he pressed play. The video moved again. On the couch, Evan said something quietly. The camera didn't catch the words, but I saw the way my shoulders shifted. the way my lips parted slightly as if I was about to respond. Instead, I looked down, right at his hand resting behind me. That small movement seemed to break whatever restraint had still been holding us apart. Evan leaned in closer, and on the screen my body didn't move away. I felt my pulse quicken as the moment replayed in front of us, because I remembered exactly what happened next. His fingers slid gently along my arm, not demanding, just exploring. The touch was so light it almost seemed accidental, but my reaction wasn't. On the video, a visible shiver ran through my shoulders. I turned toward him then, my face tilting upward slightly. Our eyes locked. Even through the grainy black and white footage, the tension between us was obvious. Across the table, my husband paused the video again. Right before the moment our lips would have met, the silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had come before. Finally, he leaned back in his chair again, folding his arms loosely. "You see," he said quietly, "that's where I thought the story ended." My brow creased slightly. "What do you mean?" His expression didn't change. For a while, that's all I watched. He tapped the tablet lightly. The hallway camera. The living room camera. That moment. His eyes lifted back to mine. And I assumed the worst. My chest tightened painfully. Because that certainly looks like a kiss about to happen. I nodded slowly, unable to argue. But something in his voice had shifted again. There was still calm in it. But now there was something else. Something colder. More certain. My husband reached forward and dragged the timeline again. Further this time. Much further. The timestamp jumped ahead. 12:31 a.m. My pulse stumbled. The screen showed the living room again. But now the couch was empty. The lamp still glowing quietly in the corner. For a few seconds nothing happened. Then the bedroom door at the end of the hallway slowly opened. And I felt my stomach drop. Because the person who stepped out first was me. My hair slightly messy. My shirt wrinkled. My steps careful and quiet as I crossed the living room toward the kitchen. Behind me, Evan followed. Across the table, my husband watched my reaction carefully. My throat felt tight. Because I hadn't realized something before. Not until this moment. Not until seeing the angle of the camera. The living room security camera had a clear view of the hallway. And the hallway had a clear view of the bedroom door. My husband spoke gently. Almost thoughtfully. "You told me nothing happened." My chest rose slowly with a shaky breath. "Yes." He nodded once. Then tapped the screen again. Freezing the moment where Evan stepped out of the bedroom behind me. And when he looked back at me this time, the curiosity in his eyes had completely disappeared. Now there was only quiet certainty. "Are you still sure about that?" For a long moment, neither of us moved. The tablet lay between us on the kitchen table, the frozen image still glowing faintly. Me stepping out of the bedroom. Evan behind me. The lamp in the living room casting long shadows across the floor. Evidence. Quiet. Undeniable evidence. My hands rested in my lap now, fingers twisted together so tightly my knuckles had turned pale. I couldn't look at the screen anymore. Instead, I looked at my husband. He was watching me the same way he had all night, calm, patient, almost thoughtful. But now the softness was gone. His eyes were sharper, clearer. Like he had already reached the end of the story hours ago. "You told me nothing happened," he repeated gently. My throat tightened. Yes. The word came out weak. Because we were both staring at the same image. And it said otherwise. He leaned back slightly in his chair, folding his arms loosely across his chest. "What were you doing in our bedroom?" he asked. The question landed softly, but it echoed loudly inside my chest. I swallowed. He just followed me. Another lie. Even saying it made heat crawl up my neck. My husband studied my face for a moment longer. Then he reached forward and tapped the tablet again. The video resumed. On the screen, I walked into the kitchen, the same kitchen we were sitting in now, and leaned both hands against the counter like I needed a moment to steady myself. Evan appeared a second later in the doorway. Even on camera, you could see the tension between us hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened. He stepped closer behind me. Too close. I didn't move away. Instead, my head tilted back slightly as if I already knew where he was standing. The moment lasted only a few seconds before my husband paused the footage again. My chest rose slowly as I forced myself to breathe. I didn't realize the cameras could see that far, I murmured quietly. It wasn't a defense. It was just the truth. My husband's eyebrow lifted slightly. That's what surprised you? The question made my stomach twist. Because suddenly I understood something. This entire conversation, this entire calm interrogation, had never been about the cameras. He already knew what they showed. He had known the moment he sat down. The footage wasn't for him. It was for me. My husband leaned forward again, resting his forearms on the table. Then he said something that made the air leave my lungs. You're not the one who sent me the footage. My head snapped up. What? He slid the tablet slowly across the table toward me again. On the screen was the same clip. Me in the kitchen, Evan behind me, his hand beginning to reach for my waist. But now there was something else visible in the corner. A small email notification overlay. The sender's name. Evan. My heart slammed against my ribs. I looked back up at my husband, confusion flooding through the panic. Why would he? My husband answered before I could finish. He sent it this morning. His voice was steady, controlled. But now I could see something underneath it. Something wounded. Something furious. He also sent a message. My pulse pounded in my ears. What did it say? My husband held my gaze for a long moment before answering. Then he spoke quietly, like someone repeating words they wished they had never read. He wrote, I thought you deserved to know who your wife really comes home to at night. The room went completely still. And for the first time since this conversation began, my husband looked like a man who had been betrayed. Not curious. Not calm. Just hurt. He leaned back slowly, exhaling through his nose. Then he asked the one question I had been afraid of since the tablet first lit up. Tell me something honestly. My chest felt hollow. Did you ever plan to tell me? His eyes locked onto mine. Or was I supposed to find out like this? The question didn't sound angry. That was the worst part. My husband wasn't shouting. He wasn't slamming his fists on the table. He was just sitting there across from me, shoulders slightly slumped now, the tablet dimming slowly between us. Waiting. Did you ever plan to tell me? Or was I supposed to find out like this? I opened my mouth, closed it again, because suddenly all the rehearsed explanations that had lived somewhere in the back of my mind felt pathetic. Small. Like paper shields against something much heavier. The truth was sitting right there on the screen. And it was bigger than any lie I could invent. No, I finally whispered. The word barely made it across the table. His eyes didn't move. No, I wasn't going to tell you. The honesty hurt more than the lies. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened slightly. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. The kitchen light hummed faintly above us. Somewhere outside a car passed slowly down the street. Ordinary sounds. In a moment that suddenly felt anything but ordinary. Finally he looked down at the tablet again. His finger brushed the dark screen, waking it. The paused frame returned, me in the kitchen, Evan behind me, his hand inches from my waist. My husband studied it for a moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. You know what bothers me most? I forced myself to meet his eyes. It's not that you wanted him. My chest tightened. His voice stayed calm. I saw that the second I watched the video. He tapped the screen lightly. You looked at him like someone starving. Heat flooded my face. But he continued before I could react. What bothers me is him. My brow creased slightly. What do you mean? My husband leaned back slowly, crossing one leg over the other. Evan didn't send me that video to help me. The quiet certainty in his voice made something uneasy stir in my stomach. He sent it to hurt me. The room felt colder somehow. My husband reached for the tablet again. But instead of replaying the clip we'd been watching all night, he opened another file. Another camera angle. My pulse quickened. This one came attached to the same email, he said. Then he turned the screen toward me. The timestamp read 12:38 a.m. The camera angle looked unfamiliar. Lower. Closer to the floor. Then I recognized it. The small camera we had installed near the garage door. The one that caught movement when someone left the house late at night. The video played. The garage door opened slowly, and Evan stepped through it first. His jacket was back on. his expression tense. Behind him, I followed, my arms wrapped around myself like I suddenly felt cold. The footage continued. Evan turned toward me, said something, and even though the camera couldn't record the sound, I remembered the words instantly. You'll tell him eventually. In the video I shook my head. Fast. Certain. Then I said something back, my lips moving clearly enough that even now I could read them. No. I won't. The clip ended. The screen went still again. Silence filled the kitchen one last time. My husband watched me carefully. Then he asked quietly, "Do you know what Evan wrote at the end of his message?" I shook my head slowly. My husband looked down at the tablet, then back up at me. He said, "She didn't choose me." My chest tightened. "But she didn't choose you either." The words landed like a weight in the center of the table between us. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about what I had done. It was about the moment I thought no one would ever see. The moment I chose neither of them. My husband leaned back slowly, studying my face one last time. Then he spoke the quietest sentence of the night. "I guess the cameras weren't the only thing watching." And somehow, that was the moment I realized the truth. Not every betrayal happens in the dark. Some of them unfold slowly, right in front of you.